following program on Ada Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. The following program contains opinions of the participants and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network. The network believes in a safe space for all ideas to be expressed without any censorship and on its duty to create such a platform for free speech. Viewer discretion is strictly advised.
A very good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Get Real, where we have conversations about what's happening around in our country, around the world, and try to get you a different take than what is available on mainstream media. Tonight, I want to, from time to time, we usually do this, go away from Sri Lanka and not just talk about the issues here, but talk about the issues that's happening beyond our shores. Why? Because Sri Lanka is a member of the global community. We think that apparently what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Africa, what's happening in Europe is not going to affect us because, we are far away. The sad truth is it is impacting us directly. That's where we really need to understand what's happening in the world and how it's impacting us here at home. In order to do that, there is none other than former Foreign Minister Dr. Sarath Amunugama. Welcome back to the show, sir. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you taking the time. So I want to talk about three issues per se. One thing that is mostly we don't see it on our primetime news or is being very much discussed here in Sri Lanka is what's happening in Africa. There are little bit of incidences that are taking place which are very much globally important. It is giving a new precedent to the whole conversation in terms of global affairs. I'm talking about Niger, where the military came and took over, and basically there was a coup, and now the military is implementing matters that are concerning Niger per se, not the things that the world needs them to do. Now, before we get into Niger, can you just explain where this is, what this country is, and what the composition is like for our viewers to understand?
As you mentioned, Mahieash, now Africa is the name of the game. Increasingly, global attention is being focused on Africa. And as you mentioned earlier, even other issues like Ukraine, Pakistan, Taiwan, all those other hotspots are also directly or indirectly related to what is going on in Africa and what will go on in Africa. Niger is only the beginning, I think, of a whole series of activities that will draw global attention to Africa. If you take Niger, it's part of the Sahel region in
West Africa?
West Africa. It is really part of a grouping of three. You have Niger, you have Burkina Faso, and you have Mali. All three were part of the Sahel. And in a way, there's an intimate connection with us also because today Sri Lankans are there in Mali with the UN peacekeeping force. So Niger is now the main focus of attention both in the West and East, both in the Western countries and in Russia and China. What happened there? The first thing is to understand that the Sahel and indeed the whole of Africa is mineral rich. It is a rich continent. Just below the surface of the Sahel, of South Africa, of all these African countries, there are huge resources, just as much as
still untapped.
Still untapped. Now, that was the case in the countries of Arabia, as they used to call it, till they discovered oil. But now,
and then America went to give them democracy.
Exactly. And now what is important about Niger is that it is one of the world's biggest producers of uranium. Uranium is the basic mineral or commodity that is necessary for the atom bomb.
Yeah.
Or the hydrogen bomb, for nuclear energy. I mean, if you see this film Oppenheimer, you will understand
exactly.
the whole story of how they used uranium, refined uranium. So the whole world is seeking that, because the West is not producing any uranium. America is not producing any uranium. Western Europe is not producing any, but Russia and Niger are uranium producers. Number two, they are also producers of gold, large amounts of gold. So is Russia. So these commodities are now located in countries which have been exploited very badly by the colonial powers. The colonial power in this area has been France.
Yeah.
So now the question arises, there is a surge of thinking, activity, political dialogue, even confrontation regarding the way forward for Africa. That period when there was the colonial period and the immediate post-colonial period, which was dominated by what you would call the metropolitan country. It was France in one case, UK in another. Actually, when you study the First and Second World Wars, that also was to some extent a struggle to find room in the colonies. Hitler called it Lebensraum, living space. So that was one of the issues, because the British got there first, and then the French, and even small countries like Belgium controlled one of the biggest countries, the Congo. So Niger is resource rich, mineral rich, gold rich. And you know that the French had a force, and even now they are a force of 1,500 soldiers located there.
So what these Western countries has been doing to countries like Sri Lanka during the 1800s, the 1600s, the 1700s, basically colonizing and taking, the rich entities that those countries, for us it was the spices. So basically that is happening in real time in parts of West Africa.
It's a big issue. It's a living issue even today.
So colonization didn't end.
Colonization didn't. This is economic exploitation. That would have been more or less a political, an overt political arrangement. But these are covert arrangements. America has a base in Niger, military base. France has a military base. They have a large force there, helicopters, ships, everything. So what has happened is, earlier Mali and Burkina Faso, they also had coups of their own, because they also are resource rich. And now the third country that was left in the Sahel region, that is Niger, also has joined in that. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, I think, there was this big conference of African states held in Moscow. Under Putin was the participant, in which the young military leader of Burkina Faso virtually dominated that conference, and he took a very strong anti-colonial line. So what was the main plaything of the imperialists, if we may call it, the Sahel, because of their natural resources, has now converted itself, because of the extremities of colonialism and exploitation, into an area, a sort of front runner in the anti-colonial movement.
Let's talk about the importance of what's occurring in that region. Now, you spoke about the fact that the exploitation was occurring. Earlier it was to get the resources, now it's economic exploitation, because the West needs to pump the economy by using these resources in countries that are not economically developed. Now that narrative is changing. When you look at the West, if you look at America, if you look at Canada, if you look at Europe, this woke ideology saying that the white man is bad is very much now, in it. So do you think that is the reason we see like these kinds of coups coming up, and it is getting the backing and the support of the people in the area saying, yeah, it's high time you guys rose up and, fought for what you believed in?
Yeah. Well, this is obviously linked to, firstly, the rise of China as a global political and economic power. Secondly, it is linked to the persistence of Russia, to the fact that in spite of this Ukrainian war, which we will discuss later, they have not been able to bring down the impetus, the momentum of the Russian Federation. So this, together with what is happening with BRICS and so on, the assault on the dollar and the attempt to create a new international currency, is all creating, for the first time, a major crisis for the Western powers. Earlier it was a matter of military force, but now with the Chinese coming up, Russia, basically BRICS countries, now they are also talking of India, South Africa, with all these countries coming up, becoming
who are they
good
rising
economic
against?
powers. No, the Western domination
Is it just
of the
America
economy.
or the whole Western concept?
The whole of the West, because the Western dominance of the global economy. Let us call it the G7.
Yeah.
Now, the G7 was the primary dominant and rich, wealthy economic organization. But now they say with the BRICS and with the likelihood of Saudi Arabia, Algeria, all these countries coming into that, there is a very good chance that the GDP of this grouping, China, Russia, South Africa, all these people, will make it the equal or in fact the superior of the G7, the GDP of those countries. So that is going to shake up the whole global economy.
There are conversations about the BRICS countries, rising against the West, but what it lacks is the meat on the bone, because it's just a concept for the moment. We still have not seen concrete plans of we are moving away from this to that. Is this just another hahoo by, let's say, the BRICS countries, mainly Moscow and Beijing? These guys are just creating this, because after all, we need to understand that Russia, not so much right now, but very much China, they are trading very heavily with the West, and their entire economy is linked to that. So in an instant like that, they don't want the West to fall economically because they still need a market to access. So do you think this is just, random rhetoric in order to put America in its place, or is there really something occurring underneath?
No, I think this is what they call a tectonic shift in the global economic situation. How it is going to play out in the future is a different matter. For example, even in Ukraine, many years ago, there have been think tanks in the United States saying, look, things are not moving, that you have to put an end to the movement of Russia, the growth of Russia. So Ukraine was really almost like an afterthought. So there is definitely a shift based on basic economic matters. So now look at the case of Niger again. Look at how it's being played out. Nigeria, which is one of the biggest countries in what is called the ECOWAS. Now ECOWAS comes into the picture. That is the Economic Commission of West Asian countries. West Asian countries. So ECOWAS is now leading the attempt to somehow either negotiate with Niger or eliminate them. Because at first they took a very strong line. They gave a deadline by such and such a date. If you don't release that president, and if you don't bring down the status quo, we are going to militarily intervene. All the heads of the military in ECOWAS were brought together for discussions. But very clearly they found that that is not going to be a very serious option. They are back at the negotiating table. Because look at the boundaries of Niger. On the north is Algeria, a very strong anti-imperialist grouping on one side. Then on the other side, the Sahel countries. And on one side, of course, Nigeria.
I want to ask you, now Sri Lanka is a country, again, if you look at we have been under the thumb of the Western nations, I think 500, 600 years to now, and we are continuously still being. What can we learn from countries like Africa? Because if you look at Niger is a good example. Uganda, when Uganda president does not want the whole concept of LGBTQ matters coming into their country because it does not go in line with their culture, and he rejects it. He brings a bill and he makes it legal. He makes it illegal. The World Bank steps in and says, we're going to no more loans for you guys. They're basically wagging their finger and telling, just like how the IMF is telling us, do this, do that. But then the Ugandan president gave the middle finger to the World Bank. You see these kinds of strong action by these leaders coming from Africa. Is there anything we can learn from that?
Yes, of course. The first thing we can learn as Sri Lankans is that we have to look at these issues globally. Exactly. We have to look at our position firstly in the Asian scenario, then in the vis-a-vis the BRICS, and vis-a-vis the global situation. So this needs a lot of rethinking. This doesn't mean that we are going to de-link with the West. Nobody is suggesting that. I don't think, now of all the countries in the world, people who will suffer the most if there is a de-linkage with the West would be China.
Yes.
Because Chinese prosperity is based on trade. And this is really, now for instance in Sri Lanka, everybody is talking of national economy, our economy. We can't have anything outside. We should be growing paddy here and growing vegetables and having that sort of potty little economy. Some political parties are also suggesting that. Now it is ridiculous, because the so-called communist countries, if you take China, you take Russia, their spectacular growth is due to trade, due to who are the people who are insisting on global trade rules.
They are basically growing to sell, not growing to eat, per se.
Exactly. No, because they have the resources to do that. They have the population, they have the land, now they have got the technology. So the situation is going to change. It does not mean that these countries will de-link themselves, but the relationship will definitely change. So when that is going to be a traumatic situation for all these countries. Now take even now if you move, as we had discussed earlier, Mahieash, now take the case of Pakistan.
I want to stop you there because I want to give an entire segment for that. But before we go in for a break, very quickly, Doctor, what do you think would happen? Because are you going to see more countries, let's say in Africa, maybe in the Arabian region, or even maybe South America? Because Argentina just voted in surprisingly a very far right candidate as their president.
On the way, it is not the final thing.
I think they basically, it looks like he's going to.
Looks like it, yes.
Far right candidate. But they never thought about that.
Yes.
And like that, you see these kinds of elements. Basically, a lot of countries are taking care of themselves. This is what they want to do. They're no longer. Obviously part of the global citizenry, but no longer wants to cater into the ideology of the global citizen concept. They want to take care of themselves. In an instant like that, you see the US election, which is basically next year. And Trump seems to be the front runner. Biden is dead, I think. He literally, figuratively and literally, he's dead. But there is this conversation about Michelle Obama suddenly being put as the wild card and halt Biden's second term because of the fact that age is an issue there. But do you think things will go back and that the world will start working in a very cohesive manner with America if there is another Trump presidency? Or what is your take on that?
Basically, the economic relationships cannot change immediately. But I find, I've been following this Trump campaign, he is taking a very what he calls
America first.
against the neocons.
Yeah.
He's attacking the neocons. He's saying Biden is representing this, he calls them the lunatics, political lunatics who are putting everybody at risk. And he says, if you elect me, in one day I'm going to stop this war.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So he's taking an entirely different position. And definitely I think...
And the people are listening.
Putting America first. And I think he will be irresistible. So much so that now you can see, yesterday I was watching the American news, Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
He's a new face.
Yeah, exactly. And a very good orator.
Very good orator, very bold. He is to the right of Trump.
Yeah.
You know. But Trump has a good word for him because he says, you can't do this to Trump. So DeSantis, he's now almost caught up with DeSantis. So it looks very much though that Trump will emerge as the Republican candidate.
But would he be able to get the national vote in the end?
I think so. As it is, though there are sort of domestic compulsions because the Biden administration has not been bad domestically. Economy has expanded, GDP, the growth is there, employment has improved, those are there. But then the personality of Biden is there, there's corruption charges. So unless they find another candidate.
Yeah. Let's take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with the former Foreign Minister, Dr. Sarath. We've been talking about global events. I want to get into Pakistan, what is happening there. There are lots of good stories which came out last week with regard to Pakistan, with regard to Imran Khan, who has been behind the whole entire coup. Let's talk about it right after this break. You're watching Get Real. We'll be back. Welcome back everyone to Get Real. I'm in conversation with former Foreign Minister Dr. Sarath Amunugama. Doctor, I want to let's go to Pakistan and talk about what's happening there because it is very, very similar to what's happening here at home. Last week, news broke that apparently secret cables, which is, if you want to understand, instead of going into detail, it's just like WikiLeaks. A secret cable was exposed, and it said that America directly wanted Imran Khan, the former Pakistan Prime Minister, out. And they did it. But here in Sri Lanka, Doctor, it's people's revolution coming from the ground and all that kind of this thing. What are we to learn from that? What exactly are we? I mean, obviously we know that America is putting their hand into every cookie, every jar in Sri Lanka right now and basically have controlled everything. What can we learn from the incident in Pakistan and what's happening there?
Well, the first conclusion we can draw is that American foreign policy today is not what it was, say, 5 years ago. Many people think that, well, there's continuity, this is America, the democratic beacon, and greeting everybody who comes from abroad. And that is not so. The current American view of the world and how they want to control the world is totally different from the history of what happened in the past. So we have to get real, to use your title. First thing is we have to get real and we have to understand. Not many people have bothered to study this. Number two, America is facing an existential crisis in the sense that for the last from the time of the end of the Second World War, they have been the dominant power because of the dollar, because of the economy, because of military strength, because of armaments. They have dominated the world in different ways. But for the first time, it is being challenged because China is the second global power, India is emerging, Russia is also one of the strongest powers. I think it will be beating Europe in the near future as an economy with growth. So the ball game is completely different. Now take the case of Nuland. Now it's very strange. She visited Ukraine. She visited Niger, she visited Sri Lanka, like the angel of death. She's like the angel of death. Wherever she goes, there's trouble. You know, and what does she stand for? She stands for this neocon approach to politics. Somehow Biden has gone along with that. And even Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is also an exemplar of that type of thinking. Now see what happened vis-a-vis China, because the main antagonist as far as this group is concerned is China, not even Russia. Russia also if possible, but their main contention is you have to put down China now or you will never get that chance again. So that is what they are thinking. Now then we come to Pakistan in that context. One is China and Pakistan have common borders. Not only common borders, but very strong friendship. And as an aside, I might say, a few weeks ago, China got down Kissinger. Oh, he's a centenarian. But still he did the 14-hour trip because China wanted to send a message. What Nixon did with Kissinger is what America should be doing.
Exactly.
Don't push us into a situation where Russia and China is just one camp. What was the Nixonian policy? At that time, he wanted to break up this linkage between Russia and China. Told China, look, it is in your interest to be good with us. Not so much, you can continue to have your friendship with Russia, but we are also a player. So when Xi Jinping had a special audience with Kissinger, they analyzed it and said, the message they want to send is, look, don't do this. Try to think of what Nixon did at that time. Anyway, that is by the way. But Pakistan is a test case that Sri Lanka must take much, much more seriously. Partly because we have very good relations with them. Then secondly, it influences our relations with India and in the region. And also affectionate relationship, I must say, with Imran Khan. He has always had a good word for Sri Lanka. He has a lot of friends in Sri Lanka. And you know, now it's laughable, the charge that they made that he had kept some of the gifts that were given, official gifts as president. And his former wife, Emma Goldsmith, made a statement saying, my father offered him £1 billion as a divorce settlement, £1 billion, Imran Khan, because that was her husband. But he didn't take it. He said he wanted to get back to Pakistan. So it's very unlikely that he would have played out on some little gift given by somebody else. That's just a ridiculous sort of use of this sort of thing. And what has happened is now, as you said, the cables are coming out now, clearly saying because he visited Russia.
What was the reason that they wanted him out?
That he had visited Russia. That they seemed to be endorsing the Russian stand on Ukraine. In fact, it didn't go that far even. He made an official visit. And of course, he has had very strong and good relations with China. So, US is looking at it this way, because for about almost from independence, Pakistan had been a client state of the US. Billions of dollars had been pumped into Pakistan in a way of trying to keep the Afghanistan war going. So,
that was another joke.
That's another tragedy for them. So they feel that Pakistan is not grateful to them. And the internal structure of Pakistan is that the army is running the show. There's no doubt about it. Because, in fact, once I was in Pakistan as an observer of the elections, Pakistan elections at that time. Some of us, Rauf Hakim, few of us also there. Neelan Tiruchelvam. So what we found was, you know, the different groupings that are made as Pakistan are all independent units virtually. Baluchistan, you know, the Sindh, then the Punjab, then the Bengali side, like that. So they are all entities and they are held together only by the force that is used by the army. Not only the army, by the ISI, the intelligence and security arm. They won't allow any of those. Now, though we talk big here about devolution and these things like that, they don't allow any of those. Only a few months ago, I think they killed the Baluchistan leader who was emerging. And today, because it is creating problems, they have brought one of those minority people and made him the interim prime minister just now to succeed Imran Khan. So what has happened here is that this global contest between China, between America, between the West and Russia is being played out on Pakistani soil, just as much as it is been done in Niger, just as much as it is done in Ukraine.
And even in Sri Lanka. Because we are also, even though you say that it's very vital for us to learn what's happening, to understand what's happening in Pakistan, I think Pakistan learned from us, because recently the finance minister of Pakistan said that the IMF, along with the World Bank, America wanted them to default like Sri Lanka at the verge of an economic crisis. They are in a very thick economic crisis right now.
Yes.
And they didn't want to do that. That was not the path they wanted to go, and that is very sad that we did it in a manner that we won't be able to recover. If you look at what's happening right now, it's basically bow down to all these foreign powers. In an instant like that, what do you think the future of Pakistan would be? Because India wants a weaker Pakistan. They don't want a stronger Pakistan, and that kind of goes into this narrative of them allowing the whole, American conspiracy and things like that to play out on the sideline. Because as long as America comes and does the deed, and Pakistan is not strong, not united, it's not a threat to India. In that context, what do you think?
Well, in a way, as you say, we have some common features with Pakistan. Because the bulk, the large amount of debt of Pakistan is with China, just as much as we also have we don't have the same percentage, but we also have substantial debt to China. So a lot will depend on the Chinese reaction to the Pakistan debt, just as much as a lot will depend on their reaction to our debt. So the IMF is well aware of that. The IMF had to come in at that time because Pakistan was hit by a double or triple whammy. There were the floods, then there was the famine, there was political discontent, all sorts of things that could hit them at that time just as much as we are doing. Now look at the climatic problems we have here now. That the 100-fold was there in Pakistan. So Pakistan still is in a bad way, and this is only an interim arrangement. Obviously, they are planning something even bigger, because now they are going to declare elections, and we have to see what happens. But definitely now in Pakistan, it is very clear that the army is calling the shots.
Today is India's Independence Day as well, and I want to ask you, what do you think India is trying to do? Because there is this big question that I've always been having, and I'm trying to figure out, when America comes and establishes themselves in Sri Lanka, when they come and do the same thing in Pakistan, and especially in countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, all those countries, basically surrounding India. And here India wants to play a different game, which I still do not understand why they're allowing these types of threats to come very close to their home. Maybe it's like you keep your enemies closer than your friends kind of scenario. But what do you think in the long run that India wants to do right now?
No, India's first question with Pakistan is absolutely clear. That is Kashmir. Because from the days of independence, there was this big controversy about Kashmir.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into details about Maharajas seceding and this and that legal position, though the population was largely Muslim, the Maharaja was Hindu, he seceded to the Indian Union, and they sent the troops and captured half of Kashmir. So as far as India is concerned, they cannot agree to any of the points made by Pakistan in respect of dividing Kashmir. And Modi has a much more extreme position than the Indian Congress on Kashmir. Actually, Nehru, he himself was a Kashmiri Brahmin, had a more tolerant view of Kashmir, saying that, there's the line of demarcation. You try to solve this peacefully. originally he suggested to the UN to have even a plebiscite. So that was a soft approach. But with the Modi government, they are taking a very tough approach. And they have brought in, these are very important for Sri Lanka. Though we are talking big of America, India will come and save us, and India is forcing us to do this and that, as some people think here. What did they do in Kashmir? They changed the constitution to say that Kashmir is now like an integral part of another state of India, which again raised the ante regarding the hostility about the ownership of, Azad Kashmir and the balance. So, first is Kashmir. India cannot afford to have a situation where their claims to Kashmir is compromised, because then 70 or 77 years after independence, if they have to say that, then all that policy is wrong, and definitely it is it will be going against the Hindutva concept, because that the land mass is to be brought under Hindutva. So one is that. Second is, India is an economic powerhouse. India is not this old Gandhian, Indira type of what was called the Indian rate of growth, or Brahmanic rate of growth. That was 1%, 2%. No, India is a huge giant. Now I can't understand some parties in Sri Lanka. They are glibly saying, even the JVP, I can mention JVP and some of the other leftist parties saying, well, we have to industrialize. Our policy is industrialization. What you said in the past is not so. Dr. Vikram, now the Communist Party is in that. He said, Dr. Vikramasinghe said, we must industrialize all that. But you can't just, by passing a resolution, industrialize. There are so many things you have to do. You have to allow investment. You have to give them land. You have to give large swaths of land for development. You have to have good relations and trade agreements with all those. Are they willing to do all that? When the JVP and the Communist Party says that they have to industrialize, are they willing to subscribe to all those other steps that you have to go along that? Are you allowing foreign investment? Are you going to allow trade pacts? No? Are you going to have a monetary union? Today they are shouting you can't use Indian rupees. So the people who are shouting you can't Indian rupees, how can they talk of a monetary union? How can they talk of industrial? I mean, it's ridiculous, no?
I mean, it is because, the theory of the JVP, in my opinion, Doctor, seems to be like, just chaos everywhere as long as there's chaos, because they don't make sense. Like you just said, they're saying investment needs to come, but as soon as an investor comes and invests in an article in Sri Lanka, the first thing that they do is their trade unions will be right in front of them protesting.
No, I must say, I think it's a good development when they are getting out of this national economy idea, Jatika, Arthike idea, into an industrialized. That is good. The Communist Party going into that and JP going to that is good. But they must then face up to the implications of that policy.
And that's where you question whether is it another gimmick.
I mean, to make it a reality, you have to take all those appropriate steps.
Absolutely. There's another topic that I want to talk about with Dr. Amunugama. But before that, let's take a short commercial break. We want to talk about Ukraine. After this break, you're watching Get Real. We'll be right back. Welcome back everyone to Get Real. I'm in conversation with former Foreign Minister Dr. Sarath Amunugama. We've been talking about events around the world and how it's impacting Sri Lanka. There is another country that actually led to our economic crisis because of the events that was occurring there. Suddenly there was war in Ukraine, and then our economic crisis occurred because of oil prices fluctuating, going up. We couldn't find the amount of dollars in order to pay for that service. Hence we saw the economic crisis thickening here in Sri Lanka. So there's a direct impact of Ukraine war to Sri Lanka. Still, what I want to ask from you, Doctor, is Ukraine the 51st state of the United States of America? Because when you look at the amount of money that is being pumped into Ukraine at the moment, definitely it's like they want to colonize. Ukraine, and maybe they might be the region that America can call and come and say it's our home. I think more than 200, I think around 6 billion, 7 billion, then 200 million. Like that, there is still, I think President Biden is asking for more. And then there is this other side of the story where Biden family, according to Fox News, Biden crime family, is getting money from Ukraine itself. What do you think about this pumping of funds into Ukraine and how it's impacting? Because we definitely know, even though they say it's for development, it's not for development. It's a proxy war that the US is fighting on Ukraine against
Mahieash,
Russia.
the best answer was given by Trump a few days ago. You know what he said? He said, these fools are dumping all these, just exactly what you said. They're dumping all these American dollars. What is the use of doing this? And he said, look, in this war effort, 80% of the funding is undertaken by us. What are those Europeans doing? He has always been saying
that.
It's their
backyard.
Yeah, they are not accepting their share of the responsibility. He said even earlier, even NATO, he was attacking NATO, saying, well, they are calling it all this, but they are not putting in a cent or very small amount of money. It's all American money, American taxpayers' money. And only last week, he said, what has Biden done? He has taken all this American money, billions and billions of dollars, and dumped it on Ukraine, when the Europeans who are their neighbors, who are immediately affected by this, are really not pulling their weight. They may have a few propaganda stunts like sending the Tiger tanks and all that, but he analyzed the financial contribution and said NATO is not really pulling its weight. So that is the first thing. The number two part of it is that the war is going very badly for the West.
Yeah.
Extremely badly. Because the best example is just 2 days ago, they asked for general joining into the army. That is called general mobilization. That is the last step that when your regular troops, your professional troops are slaughtered or decimated, and then foreign troops are also not allowed to come in because of the fear of another world war, but secretly Americans and British and all are there, but not in such large numbers. So what are they going to do? They have to then expand the number of people who are recruited into the army. First the volunteers are over now. Then they are taking other categories, students, young professionals, this and that, and now they have called for general mobilization. Anybody over a certain age has to become. So that is a very desperate measure when a country goes for general mobilization.
Explain this to me, sir. Now, they're pumping so much of money into Ukraine.
Yeah.
At the same time, they're accepting, I think, more than 500,000, 600,000, 1 million Ukrainians to go back to America as basically citizens. They can move back to America. What is happening? I mean, when they keep pumping money outside of their economy and give it to a foreign nation, inflation is definitely going to go up in America, and that is going to clearly impact the common man, the one who is working really hard in order to make sure that those money that Biden is freely giving to Ukraine is funded. But America's debt crisis is nobody's talking about it. It's, I think, over 120% of their GDP. About a couple of days back, there was a report saying that over $1 billion of credit card debt was reported in that country.
Yes.
So when that kind of things are happening, I'm pretty sure this is not good for that economy to keep pumping money outside to Ukraine, to other countries, and give it freely. Why do you think they continuously go on this track? Because I'm pretty sure there is somebody sitting in the White House telling President Biden, dude, wake up, this is not good for us.
No, initially it was an ideological battle. No, long before the actual shooting war started, there were think tanks in the US saying, look, unless you tackle Russia at this stage, and virtually, let's use the word cripple them.
And they're not crippled now.
No. But what he said, what these neocons, unless you do that, in the long run, we are going to have a very big problem. That is the argument which led to this intervention. Whereas the America firsters like Trump said, no, that's a different matter. Proportionately, we should be considering American interests and not what is happening there. We can tackle Russia in a different way. So that dialogue was there. Biden is a captive of that group, the Tony Blinken, the Nuland, the hard war warriors. You know, so that's how they got in there. But now the question is, what is happening on the ground? On the ground, they are losing the war because they talked of this big offensive, the spring offensive, which is supposed to overrun the areas which were taken over by the Russians. But they are not doing that because this has been mined. They have been having these different, the units ready to meet the oncoming people who are doing this offensive. So as a result, the offensive has petered out. It has failed in small areas. 200-300 kilometers have gone here and there. But basically the thrust to drive the Russians out of the Donbass, the area that they took over, that has failed. So now I think that they'll start talking. Already Saudi Arabia has come into the picture. The African countries are coming into the picture. And the Russians are saying, look, we are ready to settle this matter, but you have to draw the line on the Donbass.
On their path to crippling Russia, how come I think more than 20 new billionaires were emerged to the Forbes billionaire list from Russia? How is that happening? And why is Russia not crippled? Because apparently right now, I think about a couple of days back, I saw an article in The Guardian, which is a UK newspaper, which said that it's the end game for Putin. Do you think it's the end game for Putin?
Actually, it's the other way around. Because now what you mentioned, Mahieash, regarding oil, for example, they thought that by putting that embargo and putting on oil, that there will be a big problem. But what has happened? They sold all that oil to China at higher prices, sold all that oil to India at higher prices. And you know what India is doing? And we also might get into that because India is buying oil cheap, storing it, and selling it to the West, selling it to the West at a higher rate. So that even if it may be, I'm only speculating, Trincomalee tanks, they will be storing oil and selling out when they want, because it's also futures market. No? So, in fact, as far as the economy is concerned, they have not been able to cripple Russia. Because the Russian Federation is also resource rich. It's very resource rich. But what you mentioned is a problem for Ukraine. You know what they have done? Now Zelensky has fired all their regional army commanders who are in charge of recruitment, because they have been corrupt. They have been taking money and exempting various people. The rich people were not drafted into the war because they took money and left those fellows out. Some of them may have even migrated. So in one fell blow, the NATO authorities told Zelensky, you get rid of these fellows. Your regional recruitment centers have to be completely revised. And that's what they've done, because that will affect the morale of even the few fellows who are fighting.
Very quickly, I just want to wrap things up. We are running out of time. For Sri Lanka, is it a good thing to look towards the West, or is it a good thing to look towards the East? Where should we be looking at right now?
I always come back to my earlier thinking and say, we should be friends with everybody. Why should we be angry with one side or the other side? We are a small country. But this is what is called the Jaishankar doctrine. He very eloquently mentioned, he said, for India, I mean, your enemies need not be our enemies, you know. So we have to have an independent approach based on our own interests, have friendly relations with everybody. I mean, we cannot be fighting America. That is absurd, because it's a major economy. It has a big strength. We need not fight with, nor should we fight with China or with Japan or with India, because none of those countries want to pick a fight with us. There's a great incentive for them to work at a certain level of cooperation with us. So we have to be very sensitive. I think that is the problem we don't have. We have to have a good foreign service. We have to have a good political sensitivity to the basic requirements of all those countries. They have specific interests. We have to analyze those interests and see how we can, what is congruent and what is incongruent, and then try to adjust our behavior. That is very important. Sensitivity is the name of the game.
Like I always say, Doctor, our literacy rate is really high, but our knowledge is really, really low. And I don't know, people do read, but nothing is going into their head in order to understand what's happening all around the world.
But it's a high stakes game, you know.
It is, and you have to be on top of your game.
It is a high stakes game
as well. Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Get Real. I want to thank former Foreign Minister Dr. Sarath for being here. I really appreciate it. And please do come back. Let's have another chat about what's happening in the world right now and how it's impacting Sri Lanka. Well, that's all the time we have for you tonight. As you know, State of the Nation is taking a break for this month, and we'll be back again in September. See you then. Bye for now.